town went to referendum in May of 2013 with a proposal. At that time, that referendum, as put forth by the Board of Selectmen and endorsed by the Board of Finance, was defeated. Following that defeat, the Board of Selectmen went back to the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, which is comprised of 4 members of the community responsible for making recommendations for facilities, permanent facilities for the town. At that time, we asked them to reinvestigate the options, additional engineering consulting firm to review the previous proposals and to make recommendations. We also asked that they come forward with a proposal for a design build concept where we would be able to have a firm figure.
Planning to relocate the Department of Public Works facility started at least 25 years ago. The Plan of Conservation and Development dated 1990, which is a master plan required by state statute, called the site by the river inefficient and insufficient and recommended that the town relocate the facility to a site removed from the river for operational, environmental, safety, aesthetic, and land use purposes. A 1999 study committee appointed by the selectmen to examine the recommendation of the POCD endorsed the relocation of the facility and identified sites in the Commerce Drive industrial area and at the corner of Cherry Brook Road and Route 44, sometimes called Hart's Corner, for possible consideration.
Which illustrated the scale of the building, the intent of the building, the room sizes, and so forth. And with that, we were going to be able to take those specific elements, put that into a bid document in which a design-build contractor could then fairly evaluate and assign a dollar value to that. Once those public bids were brought back, we evaluated those, vetted those out, ensured that they had a clear understanding of the overall design intent, but also reviewed their suggestions to and heard clearly some of the concerns that was raised by the town for the past referendum. Size of the building, the cost of the building. So we really challenged the operations team on, can we save on square footage? Can we save in the way that we actually build this building? And we looked at it and said there's probably a lot of little things, and those lot of little things are all going to add up to be able to save a significant amount of money. So we wanted to look at cost, and it's really a challenge to begin to compare cost in 2000 to the cost of 2015. Some of the other elements that came into the design process, the reduction of design, we substituted a structured salt and sand shed. You've seen them that they're typically shingles. This went to a fabric design, which is actually being used more frequently by the state of Connecticut. We reduced the fuel storage capacity. We had much larger tanks. That's been reduced. Test pits were done, so Orlando and Dooley went out there after the bid. They did some test pits, determined that the soil conditions are favorable and that they could eliminate some of those allowances that they weren't sure of right away. So that's the benefit of the design build, is that we can work with the contractor now and he can determine what his overall cost and reduce overall risk and ultimately reduce the overall cost of the project. We were able to rework some of the grading due to the adjacent neighbor who allowed us some usage rights, so we were able to reduce a considerable amount of the retaining wall. So there's another advantage of being able to work with the contractor now. We've eliminated the sprinkler system through an evaluation. It's not required by code as long as we do some other fire protection walls and build it out of certain ratings. So we've done that, and that's a considerable savings. Reworked the HVAC systems, eliminated some of the skylights, some of the ancillary pieces. And then, as I mentioned, we've actually eliminated 2 bays that were for permanent storage. And that equipment is now just going to be jockeyed around accordingly. So operationally, they're going to work. They're down to really the space that will be the most efficient for them. And in comparison to the neighborhood impact, and from our perspective, we felt that was very important. Is looking at Lawton Road. It's about 200 feet from a single family residence. 51 River Road, 190 feet. So in comparison to the 800 feet, significant difference.
The town's own study recommends the establishment of a riverside park, and this project opens the door to very much needed recreational access. The river is an economic asset to Canton and should be carefully developed. My concern as a taxpayer, retired but holding 2 jobs, is that we reduce the losses that we suffer as a result of equipment being left outside to deteriorate and rust. Who among you leaves your expensive tools outside?
If the zoning gets changed to allow the garage, what prevents Pep Boys, Town Fair, or Goodyear Tires to buy a plot there and build a garage?
Mr. Reynolds, do you care to respond, sir?
Sure, that's a good question. The zone would be applied, it's called the MCPF, the Municipal Community Public Facilities Zone, and it would apply exclusively to this location. So nothing else in the neighborhood would change with respect to zoning.
Only the lot at 325 would be rezoned.
But is that valid? Someone else would say, you've established precedents.
That is already an industrial zone that allows a whole host of kinds of operations in there.
But we're talking specifically garages.
Municipal
garage.
Yeah, Pep Boys wouldn't qualify under the MCPF zone.
And why is that?
Because
That zone is specifically for municipal facilities, schools, highway garages, libraries, town halls, structures of that kind. It is not a zone that would allow Pet Boys or anybody else to come in there and access that site for their development.
So the issue before the voters, I think, is not do we spend no money or do we spend this money? We're going to spend money anyway maintaining a facility that's inadequate. And I saw the trucks and the equipment up close, and believe me, they are rusting outside. The other thing that occurred to me is I hold bonds in my investment portfolio, and the interest rate on bonds now, as anybody else who holds them, and I'm sure many of you do, is very low.
Republicans and Democrats recognize that this is not a political issue, but a pragmatic one. The anonymous alternative proposal that has recently surfaced strikes me as nothing more than a self-serving attempt to confuse voters at the 11th hour. The time has come to approve the Commerce Drive project, one that has been publicly and openly worked on for several years.
I visited the garage in person just to see for myself what the facts were. I took videos of Bob Martin's responses to the questions I asked him that you can see on a website that I have built called justthefactscanton, or one word, .net. And you can view the videos I took, see exactly what I saw, and make up your own mind for yourself. To me, it's clear the garage has to be replaced now. It's shameful that we ask people to work in cramped and unsafe conditions and provide hours for our safety without giving them adequate tools to guarantee their safety and any assurance that they can do the job the way it needs to be done. I have spoken with other friends in town to see how they felt. Many thought the proposal was still too expensive compared to some of the structures in Park Hampstead and Farmington. This presentation put those to rest. I did the same research you folks did, and found that in both these cases, unlike the case in Canton, the land in which the buildings were built did not have to be purchased, no greenfield site preparation had to be done.
Well, first, let me say thank you to the Board of Selectmen and everybody involved in the PMDC for sharpening your pencils from last year. I appreciate that. I still want to believe that everybody here is planning what to do beyond this step and not just looking at what can we do right now because this is necessary. It is necessary to build a new place. Looking at the Collinsville Firehouse and having discussions with the firefighters in Canton and the Collinsville and the Board of Selectmen and the municipal building people, I understand that we are going to need to replace at least the Collinsville Firehouse in the next couple of years. It'll probably be pushed off 20 years like this town garage has been. We're not very efficient at doing these things quickly. I've heard conversations that the intent is to join those two or build a new building to serve both of those firehouses' needs with the ambulance needs and rescue. I want to know from the panel if we are looking at that now, and can't we combine this with the town garage somewhere that makes sense? That's my first concern. Is are we looking at it? Our town has had a history of knee-jerk emotional reaction. Everybody's got a feeling about everything, such as the Target store, the big box store. We didn't get a big box store, well, we didn't get Target. We got 2 little box stores instead. We don't have a golf course here anymore. We got a bunch of big box stores here. I don't get the feeling that we're looking far enough ahead is chosen. I've heard other sites, people say, well, it's, zoning, there's going to be an issue. The setbacks are going to be an issue. This is going to be an issue. If it's that easy for us to make zoning changes just by waving a pen, isn't it that easy on other sites to do the same thing?
The fire station obviously is 30-plus years old. We know there were deficiencies there. And in recognizing that we were not going to be able to bond for changes or improvements or upgrades to that facility, over the last several years, the Board of Selectmen, out of the capital portion of our annual budget, has made improvements and modifications to that fire station. We've improved the doors for energy efficiency. We've installed a new heating system with propane. We are making improvements to the laboratories within that building for the staff, and we have installed the generators. So at this point in time, we are comfortable that we have a facility at the Collinsville Station that is going to last us for the next 8 to 10 years. Certainly that is adequate time to decide how we're going to go forward with respect to fire. Concept consolidating of stations is something that's going to have to be looked at. There's also going to be, over the next several years, unfortunately, a need to evaluate, and we've started some preliminary discussions with the EMS people to look at how we provide those EMS and fire services to our community. We've been very fortunate for a number of years to have relied almost exclusively on volunteers to provide those services. Times are changing. The commitment to be a firefighter is increased because of the training requirements, and it's getting more difficult to find volunteers to fill those positions. All these things are going to have to be factored into a decision on where we go with the fire stations in the community. But sitting here tonight, Board of Finance has not indicated a willingness to expand the scope of the projects to which they were willing to commit bonding money. And I can say that most definitively we've made the repairs necessary to keep that station in operation.
I don't know anything about it. What I do know is that my federal taxes go up each year, my state taxes go up, and I get nickel and dime at the town level. So I'm not happy about any discussion of taxes going up. But what I'm curious about with the full dollar proposal, has this been vetted? Has this been looked at?
For a 51 River Road facility that would accompany both the fire station and the public works garage, it called for the demolition of the existing highway department garage, demolition of the existing fire station, the demolition of the existing Little League field on Tire Avenue, construction of two new ball fields in an undisclosed location. And basically, at that point in time, this was an anonymous submission. The engineering firm that proposed that did not have its letterhead on the document, even though the document was addressed to the town of Canton, attention to the Municipal Building Commission. It was never formally submitted directly to the town. In looking at the site plan, the selectmen took the issue seriously, passed it on to both the town planner, our town engineer, and our consultants, and the assessment of that very limited and preliminary information that was provided was that it could not be constructed in accordance with the zoning setback requirements of the town. There were a whole host of other things identified also in that proposal, but that proposal was not before us. It's not before us tonight. We've actually been advised by town council that we should have no further discussion on those proposals since we have an outstanding agreement with Newly to construct a facility if this referendum goes forward.
It's just a grinding, relentless push forward towards the crease, and eventually the puck gets in. It works for the Boston Bruins, and I believe that it's the intent tonight to continue to push here, if you're following my analogy. I think that we need a town garage. I don't think anybody disputes that at all. I think this is a bad movie. We've seen it enough. But I think some of the things that got missed in the overview, first we were told that it was a $9 million proposal several years ago, then 7, then 5.4. And each time along the way, we were told that careful planning, consultants, et cetera, were all used, and this is the best that we can do. And now we're down to 4.7 or whatever the number is. Meanwhile, another idea has cropped up, which, in my view, I don't know all the details or any of the nuts and bolts of what went on, whether it was self-serving, a red herring, disrespectful, what have you. All I know is that two people who are respected in our community proposed it and backed it, and that alone should warrant additional an additional look rather than some sort of cursory thing and a dust off of we have zoning setbacks. Well, there's a zoning change that's going to be needed in the current plan that's before us. So I think that could be worked out.
Comment as well about the firehouse. I think a lot of thought has to be put into this firehouse. I'm not quite convinced that a 30-year-old building needs to be demolished. I have a real problem with that thought. Secondly, my questions on Commerce Drive: would a private company be able to build this project on that site under the current zoning regulations? And my second question is about the road in general. Is that road designed to have lots full of high-intensity uses?
That a facility of the size, magnitude, and the setbacks that are being proposed here to the highway garage, I would presume would be acceptable to be within that area. I'm getting a nod from the consultants that in fact would be the case. And certainly when that road was originally constructed, it was constructed for the industrial park.
It's just, again, it's piqued my curiosity. How much time or attention was given, or how much thought was given to potentially consolidating multiple facilities and looking at it from that standpoint, and whether or not there was great potential savings?
We did look very closely at 51 River Road. In fact, it was my first choice for at least a year, much to my colleagues' dismay, because it seemed like a natural location given the facilities that already are there. We got to the point where the only conceivable way that we could envision using 51 River Road for the highway garage facility would be to eliminate the firehouse, not to add the firehouse to the project. But the Board of Selectmen never expanded the charge to the building committee to try to do that. And I think if you envision what we've been dealing with in Canton, given it's really sort of the geographical reality of the landscape. There's very little flat land that doesn't have something on it in this town. And so once you leave the flat land, you're dealing with topography and wetlands, mostly in this community. And that, of course, adds to the cost benefit project that we built. And given the fact that we have open great number of sites that we have and open lawn we have to arrive at 325 Commerce, the idea that we could do a project that would not only meet the needs of the Department of Public Works at 19,000 square feet, give or take, but also add on top of that an additional fire station capacity, it really stretches the imagination, given the
I beg your pardon, perhaps I wouldn't like. I wasn't speaking specifically to any one side. I was just wondering about the economic efficiencies of trying to combine two projects, one that's needed like 10 years ago and one that's going to be needed sometime in the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, we're taking them one at a time, and I think that that's if you look at the course of the last 20 years, what the Board of Selectmen has asked the building committee to do is to take them one at a time, and that's why we proceeded. That's one of the reasons why we decided that this would be building committee's work with River Road. And the conclusion was not to pursue it further for 2 reasons. One, it just plain wouldn't fit and wouldn't meet the requirements of zoning. And the other is that there really was very little common space that could be shared between the two programs. So, you say, well, could you build the two of them within the same footprint? And the answer is simply no. The square footage between the two facilities would be largely additive. And the cost of each thing is pretty linear on a dollar per square foot basis, so you're just going to build a bigger building and you're going to pay that much more for it. So there really was not a lot of efficiency to combining the two. The issue that was raised before about zoning was that, well, we're going to fix the zoning anyway, why don't we change it again? What has transpired to date is that a floating zone has been developed, and it's at least partly in response to the specific needs of the DPW type facility. So there are setbacks that recognize the impact of the DPW facility on adjacent residential neighborhoods. And those are there for a reason. And I think that a municipal zoning requirement that was developed a year ago in specific response to the kind of facility we're building, to go back and acquiesce to some of the requirements, I think it just wouldn't be well received by neighbors, and I think for good reason. So I don't believe that we can possibly proceed with the combined firehouse and DPW facility on the 51 River Road side. The proposal that was put forward is very short on details. There are no floor plans. The square footage doesn't seem adequate to accommodate both of the programs. Could we do that somewhere else in town? Maybe, but finding that spot after 7 years of searching and then going through the challenges that it would present would forestall this project for many years.
As like a resident and a taxpayer here in town, we're trying to decide on whether we should build a almost $5 million garage. Why are we removing the fire suppression system from the building as a savings to the town? For probably one of the most important aspects of a building system that would protect the building and provide protection and safety.
Value engineering decisions. Our building code allows us to, whether we require to sprinkler a building, or we could address it in other ways and create fire separation areas. And this is really separating.
If there are any additional design phases, we find where we can get some additional savings, so that the bottom line remains where it is. Probably the first thing that we would put back in is that fire suppression, because we realize.
We've heard this several times by a number of speakers that we've been at this project, considering this project, for 7 years. The PMBC has been studying this, the selectmen have been studying this, there have been numerous proposals in referendum. And, the original one I was not in favor of. This one I am. I think it's the way things get done in this town, that we consider lots of alternatives. We're talking about close to 80 sites.
I have yet to see any technical reasons why 51 River Road wouldn't be a suitable site for the highway garage. There's absolutely no question that the town needs a new highway garage. The town needed a new public works facility when I was town engineer back in 1980. This was a dump then, and I'm sure it hasn't improved all that much over the last 35 years.
Appreciate all your hard work on this. We certainly have gone round and round. I remember Mr. Reynolds, I showed up at one of the meetings, and you kind of looked at me funny. And I noticed that I was the only one there. And you said there were several years that no one, and I mean no one from the public, went to a meeting. Years of time, years of discussion, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent Grants or not, damn it, we pay for the grants. Our tax dollars pay for those grants. When does someone ask the question, what does it cost to do nothing? We're not talking about a month here. We're talking about years. We're talking about several professional consultants that has helped us through this process. We're talking about people that we elected and put our trust in to help make our decisions on our tax dollars. We're talking about volunteers, our neighbors, the people we go to church with, the people we trust with our children, the people that wrote us speeding tickets. We put all of our trust in them to make the decisions. And at the very last minute, in my mind, they were crapped on by this latest proposal. Again, I'm in favor and will be voting for the new town garage.
Thank you.